Hey girls, it's your girl. You may have noticed my recent rebrand from whatever this was to becoming a wellness and lifestyle influencer. That's what I am now, that's what I'm calling this. Don't think too much about it. I've done enough thinking for the both of us, and I've come to the conclusion that thoughts are overrated. And following the wild success of my most recent diet video, I thought I'd take a little moment to recommend a gentle yet powerful exercise regimen. After all, diet and exercise without exercise is just diet and that's not a complete sentence. I've been a practitioner of yoga for well over a decade. Yoga tends to be the cross-training exercise of choice for runners like me due to the fact that it combines both strength work and deep stretching. It is also an accessible workout for beginners and experts alike due to the system of simple asanas, or postures, perfected over the course of millennia. The asanas don't get easier to perform. You just get better at them and move deeper into the postures. And yoga is so ubiquitous these days that no matter what your level of fitness or where you live, you can just head on down to the local LA Fitness or even turn on a YouTube video at home and get the same benefits from this 6,000-year-old practice. But if you really want to turn up the heat on your practice, pun intended, you can attend any Bikram or other variation of hot yoga class where heated rooms help you move deeper into postures and burn between 600 and 1,500 calories an hour. Wow. That's like an unbelievable amount of calories, right? Like, I recently ran the LA Marathon and Strava said I only burned something like 2,000 calories. I could have done one 90-minute Bikram yoga class instead. Almost sounds too good to be true. Oh, yeah, it is. Everything I just said was lies. Okay, all of it. Well, hi, I'm Hoots. This is my channel, and I guess today we're ruining yoga. But before we move on to the essay, I'd like to put you through a simple, guided meditation. Close your eyes and imagine all of your personal information being leaked to bad actors on shady websites and being sold and published online by hundreds of data brokers. Don't run away from the negative sensations that might arise. Breathe in the good news that you have the right to protect your privacy and request data brokers on websites like Ben Verified remove your personal information. Exhale the bad news that there are so many of them that doing it manually is a process that can take literal years. Now take in another deep breath and imagine you are headed into a beautiful meadow where you find the sponsor of today's video, Incogni. Incogni automatically reaches out to data brokers on your behalf, and since so many data brokers continue collecting your information even after they've removed it once, Incogni conducts repeated removal requests to ensure that your data stays off the market. If you're concerned about your privacy, or if your inner harmony is being set off balance with the constant stream of spam and robocallers, Incogni can help you finally achieve bliss. Continuing through the meadow, you come upon a babbling brook. This is the stream of discounts where Incogni has left my viewers a beautiful diamond discount. 60% off of their annual plan simply by using my link in the description and entering code HOOTS at checkout. That's a full year of protection at 60% off by going to incogni.com/hoots and entering code HOOTS at checkout. Allow your eyelids to flutter open and the corners of your mouth to break out into a gentle smile. You're protecting your privacy and signing up for Incogni today. Thank you to Incogni for sponsoring this video. If you'd like to see ad-free versions of this and all of my videos, head on over to patreon.com/littlehoot and become a patron today. Namaste. Okay, so the one thing I wasn't lying about at the top of the video is I have been doing yoga off and on for somewhere between 10 to 15 years. I've also been doing various versions of hot yoga since 2012 or 2013. My first hot classes were at a Bikram studio, but now I mostly try to avoid anything with the Bikram name due to the Bikram Chaudhry of it all. So I do want to say right at the top that all jokes aside, I'm coming at this as a hobbyist, not a hater. But there's things to criticize. There's things to hate. Expensive bougie-ass yoga brands, for one. $138 yoga leggings? Are you fucking kidding me, Aloe? Surely this is not the future BKS Iyengar imagined for us when he published Light on Yoga in 1966. For a practice that is marketed to be as spiritual as it is health-focused, yoga sure has evolved into something that is associated almost exclusively with a particular brand of wealthy white woman. Also, I don't think anyone's actually done any studies on the environmental impact of hot yoga performed in heated rooms in the Northern Hemisphere, but it can't be good, right? I've frequently wondered about the energy costs of heating studio spaces up to 105 degrees Fahrenheit and cooling them back down again. I'm gonna assume that carbon footprint is roughly Sasquatch-sized. Gonna switch my legs now. Switch them up, switch them up, switch them up. Woo! That one's tighter. One of the things that is probably more obvious to yoga novices and outsiders than dedicated practitioners is the fact that yoga can be very dangerous. It is an exercise system, and as such, not only comes with the usual risk of overuse injuries, strains, and sprains, but also you can seriously injure yourself performing some yoga postures. A lot of yoga postures, spinal twists, headstands, shoulder stands, manipulate the spine and place pressure on the head and neck, which can lead to serious injuries of the cervical and lumbar spine, worsen conditions like degenerative disc disease, and even lead to an increase in strokes, even in healthy young people. And just as a sidebar, if you go to a chiropractor, you're putting yourself at all those same risks. Spinal manipulation, especially of the neck and cervical spine, is super dangerous. And listen, as somebody with degenerative disc disease and a few of my cervical discs and a history of back problems, I know that shit feels good. But it's making these issues worse in the long run and massively increasing your risk of death by stroke. I'm leaving falling out of it in. I'm leaving it in. Additionally, if you are a fan of hot yoga, as I am, you're at a greater risk of injuries from overextending and overstretching. Warm muscles are more pliable, and as such, a heated room can help you move more deeply into postures, but this also puts you at greater risk of pulling or straining your muscles and fascia. You're also putting yourself at risk of severe heat illness and death. The same thing that regularly kills teenage football players in southern states every few years. There's been some evidence that the added stress of heat can have similar benefits as altitude training on athletes, so it's not that there's no reason to add heat to a workout. But it's important to know the signs of heat illness and to cool off and hydrate if you start to feel dizzy, nauseous, headachy, or otherwise feel you're suffering from heat exhaustion. Unfortunately, there are a number of hot yoga gurus and teachers who discourage adequate hydration, cueing students only to drink small sips at certain points in class, and sometimes urging their students to forego water in classes altogether, which can put them in serious danger. And students will often unknowingly put themselves in danger of injury or even disability and death at the behest of teachers whom they trust. Even many teachers deal with lifelong disabilities as a result of their yoga practice that they push through and worsen through an almost dogmatic belief in yoga as a system. There's a strong spiritual element to yoga that sort of sets it apart from a lot of other forms of exercise. It is linked to Hinduism and Buddhism and was introduced to the West by gurus, mentors, BKS Iyengar, Swami Vivekananda, Bikram Chaudhry, and the like, who in turn taught small groups of selected students who then went on to mentor and train their own students, et cetera, et cetera. And now yoga teacher training is like $1 billion industry or whatever. I've thought about doing yoga teacher training a few times, but the training is just like way too expensive for a job that pays $20 an hour. Anyway, that's beside the point. Many, not all, but many, yoga practitioners possess an almost delusional faith in the all-encompassing goodness and rightness of yoga, because yoga culture in the West has historically consisted of a fairly rigid mentor-mentee hierarchy, stretching back to early to mid 20th century gurus claiming the benefits of 6,000 years of mysticism and wisdom. I want to say from the jump that I've got no beef with Iyengar or Indra Devi or any of the OG yoga gurus. Bikram Chaudhry, on the other hand, will be getting his own episode of Respect the Dead. Mark my words, the Grim Reaper is coming for you, Bikram. I also have no real qualms with the more spiritual aspects of yoga practice, even though that's not really my jam. That's not really why I enjoy yoga. But I do find the pseudo-spiritual jargon and white teachers stumbling over Sanskrit sometimes a bit jarring. Like, do any of my fellow white Westerners feel like the way we do yoga here is a bit racist? Okay, so the is yoga cultural appropriation conversation is one that is long and storied and involves much brighter minds than mine. Professors of post-colonial studies, historians, scholars of globalization, religious scholars, and of course, practitioners of yoga, especially in India, where yoga originated. And I will not be wading into that particular debate. However, the history of yoga isn't as shrouded in mystery and ancient wisdom as your local core power studio would have you believe. There are indeed ancient references to the word yoga and what could be described as a yogic practice derived from Hinduism and Tantric Buddhism. But yoga as we recognize it in the West, yoga as exercise, is not 6,000 years old. It can be traced back to the late 18th and early 19th centuries. The first recognizable descriptions of yoga asanas comes from Sritatvanidhi, a treatise by Momadi Krishnaraja that features postures drawn from Indian gymnastics. Gurus Krishnamacharya, BKS Iyengar, and K. Patabi Joyce expanded on these poses in the early 1900s, developing what we would now think of as yoga. Weirdly, Krishnamacharya actually developed some of his postures from British gymnastics postures, making modern yoga both the product of colonialism and also the subject of continued colonization as it has been repackaged and sold back to a white middle-class Western audience. And that audience is who I'd like to put under my little YouTuber magnifying glass for a moment. Yoga in the West has a bit of an Orientalism problem. Orientalism is the process by which Asia or Asian practices, artifacts, or products of Asian countries are sort of divorced from their original contexts, stereotyped, and presented to a Western audience. The term was originally coined by Palestinian-American academic Edward Said to describe Western portrayals of Middle Eastern and North African cultures, especially within 18th and 19th century art and literature. But the concept has often been expanded and applied to things like the Western adoption of Eastern alternative medicines and therapies, as well as philosophical and spiritual practices. In an article for Vox, Terry Wen describes the process by which Eastern traditions and practices are decontextualized, stereotyped, romanticized, flattened, and repackaged for a Western audience, often for the purposes of capitalist consumption. It's New Age capitalism at work. A robust system of knowledge is taken apart piecemeal, divorced from any philosophical or religious roots, and transfigured into a commodity, something that can be bought and sold to improve consumers' lives. For example, gua sha is a traditional Chinese treatment that has recently gone viral online. It is intended to be a scraping treatment for a person's back and body rather than the face. Yet the beauty industry markets gua sha stones and jade rollers, another Chinese-inspired facial tool, as beautifying gimmicks, a way to contour one's jawline and mimic the results of a facelift, instead of contextualizing their traditional use. We're sold this idea of access to the secret treasures and wisdom of the Orient that is both inaccurate in that the way we're engaging with these philosophies and practices are inaccurate, but also in this very colonialist way that inaccurately and kind of racistly asserts this false dichotomy between Orient and Occident. You need only look at the way we differentiate between Eastern medicine and Western medicine. Like all of the vibes-based cure-alls with no basis in the scientific method come out of Asia. Is China not one of the leading industries in pharmaceutical research? Doth chiropractic not stem from the mystical mountains of 19th century Iowa? Yoga in the West gets tied up in this weird Orientalist game of telephone. Hindu-adjacent ideas, botched Sanskrit terms, and early 20th century American spiritualist sensibilities get balled up into what should be, for us anyway, just a nice little full-body workout with moving meditation. And because all of these Orientalist ideas about ancient Eastern wisdom based on philosophies we only half understand, there's this very real culture within the yoga world of treating yoga as a panacea. Yoga is great. I generally recommend it as a good, low-impact exercise that could benefit most people I know, but it's not actually going to cure your disability or most diseases, and in some cases, it may actually make existing conditions worse. But, you know, I don't think that's the case with most people, and I think most Westerners' experience with yoga and other Eastern therapeutic practices we mostly misunderstand, like acupuncture and cupping, are probably mostly harmless. It's better than chiropractic. I'm really fucking coming for chiropractic in this video. However, certain Orientalist tropes can misrepresent non-Western practices in a darker way, in a way that can be manipulated, perhaps to further a political agenda. Let's do a quick word association exercise. In fact, why don't you get into a comfortable cross-legged or supine position and close your eyes. I'm going to list a bunch of phrases, and you imagine what I'm describing. Natural, pure, holistic, ancient knowledge, reclaiming ancient knowledge, returning to nature, purifying the self, perfecting the self, connection to the earth, connection to the universe, spiritual energy, masculine energy, feminine energy, rejecting modernism, alternative therapies, alternative medicine, doing your own research. Okay, open your eyes. If you imagined crunchy new age yogi types, you are correct. If you imagined palingenetic fascist movements, you are also correct. Surprise, bitch, this isn't a video about yoga, it's a video about the rising tide of fascism. They're calling it the crunchy to fascist pipeline. They're calling it conspiritualism. They're calling it woo-anon. The phenomenon of aesthetically left or liberal hippie types being sucked into far-right movements and conspiracies has been the subject of focus for a lot of podcasts and think pieces since around about 2020. The introduction of mask mandates and vaccine passports following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic spawned a series of protests populated with far-right conspiracy types and wellness and new age gurus and their adherents. For many, this seemed to be the first evidence of the right-wing radicalization of crunchies. And while I'm certain some former libs in the yoga world were ultimately radicalized by the international response to COVID-19, unfortunately, the Hitler particles have been present in woo-woo spaces for quite some time. I mean, speaking of the actual devil, even the OG Nazis in the 1940s were famously interested in astrology, esotericism, and alternative medicine. That's literally why they're always looking for supernatural shit in all the Indiana Jones movies. Heinrich Himmler even carried around copies of the Bhagavad Gita and encouraged SS officers to practice yoga. In a Medium post titled Nazi Hippies, When the New Age and Far-Right Overlap, author Jules Evans quotes a Nazi professor of botany. We recognize that separating humanity from nature, from the whole of life, leads to humankind's own destruction and to the deaths of nations. Only through a reintegration of humanity into the whole of nature can our people be made stronger. This striving toward connectedness with the totality of life, with nature itself, a nature unto which we are born, this is the deepest meaning and the true essence of National Socialist thought. Wow. Environmentalist L. Checkmate, tree huggers. Maybe don't be an eco-fascist. The New Age connection of the self to nature and the earth dovetailed perfectly with the Nazi idea of Blut und Boden, blood and soil. Which is not to say that yoga or astrology or New Age spirituality are fascist in and of themselves, or that the people who practice them are uniquely susceptible to fascism. Rather, that the crunchy to fascist pipeline simply has a particularly crunchy texture. I was recently in London for a bachelorette party, and while I was there, I was lucky enough to get to see Cabaret at the Kit Kat Club, the semi-immersive production of the Kander and Ebb musical Cabaret that was launched in the West End in 2021. If you've never seen Cabaret, the movie is very good, but I'd recommend finding a bootleg recording of the Sam Mendes production of the stage show from the 1990s starring Alan Cumming. There's a bunch of them on YouTube. A good production of Cabaret is an uncomfortable experience, to say the least. Based on Christopher Isherwood's semi-autobiographical 1939 novel, Goodbye to Berlin, Cabaret is a piece with very few heroes. Rather than highlighting the resistance to the growing fascist movement in early 1930s Berlin, the musical chooses to expose the ways in which even queer and leftist spaces can be infiltrated and destroyed by fascism. It's very bleak, and yet also very funny and charming, which in turn makes you, as the audience, more disturbed by those moments of levity. I think it's an incredibly important piece of theater, and I left the production in London feeling very weird and cold about the current political climate, and also my identity as a so-called leftist living in the imperial core while multiple genocides are being carried out in full view, and in some cases with the full support of my government. The New Age community aren't uniquely susceptible to fascism. They're not even more so than the queer and leftist spaces with which they sometimes overlap. We are all dangerously close to tripping down the path of passive acquiescence or overt collaboration. People often bring up horseshoe theory, this frankly stupid idea that the far left and the far right are the same. And I'm sorry, you'll never convince me that from each according to his ability to each according to his need is the same thing as Trump saying he's going to build resorts on the raised land of murdered Gazans. Like, be for fucking real. A proposed alternative to horseshoe theory is fishhook theory that suggests that fascism actually exists closer to centrism, given the centrist tendency to politely enable fascism in the interest of being fair and balanced in the great marketplace of ideas. And while I think the conversation about the ways that moderates enable and abet far-right movements is one that cannot be had enough, I think fishhook theory tends to let the left off a little easy. Noah Berlatsky, is he cringe or canceled? I don't actually pay that much attention to him. Please do not yell at me for shouting him out if he's cringe or canceled. I don't care. Noah Berlatsky suggests a tentacle or tendril theory on his blog, everythingishorrible.net. Fascism is located on the right, but racism, nationalism, and worship of force are appealing to people of widely disparate political opinions. And I've lived through enough flame wars on twitter.x.com, the everything app, blaze your glory, to know this to be true. We all must remain vigilant against the rising tide of fascism and the little ways it curls its sneaking tendrils around each of us. And if there is anything to learn from the inward-facing practice of yoga here in the West, maybe it's to examine the self and identify and eradicate the Hitler particles within. I've caught a few interviews with a guy called Derek Barris about the Crunchy to All Right pipeline. He's the co-author of a book, Conspirituality: How New Age Conspiracy Theories Became a Health Threat, and also the co-host of the Conspirituality podcast with Matthew Remski and Julian Walker. One of the things he consistently emphasizes is how the individualist attitudes of New Age and wellness spaces in the West have made them particularly vulnerable to conspiracy theories and this rightward trajectory. You know, in many ways, these are very libertarian spaces. Very often, the wellness world and alternative therapies and things are presented as an alternative to the mainstream. Yogis going their own way. Yigtao. And I agree with Derek's assessment. I think especially Americans have a tendency to bring a very American individualist attitude into everything we do. And I kind of want to yes and that idea and observe that the kind of people in the hyper-individualist West who get really sucked into yoga or CrossFit or Soul Cycle or whatever are often drawn to these particular workouts specifically because they're suffering some of the consequences of capitalist alienation. Everyone is always like, CrossFit is a cult, Orange Theory is a cult, because the people who go to those classes get super into them and become really annoying and insufferable because of the way that these companies emphasize community and like making it to every class because you don't want to let your community down. And something about the physical and emotional exhaustion of completing a really hard class with someone on a headset yelling about how you and everyone else who just suffered through that with you are family now fundamentally alters your brain chemistry, and you become this sort of person that is like really hard to be around for a while until, you inevitably start eating pizza and drinking beer again and snap out of it. Yoga, again, I'm talking about the exercise practiced in the West here, not any real Hindu religious practices, offers this faux sort of non-denominational spirituality that can still function as a really powerful, almost religious experience for a lot of yoga practitioners. By paying for expensive studio memberships, we're almost sort of buying back this sense of community and search for a higher self that our obligations to capital rob us of. Could it also be argued that working out a lot and seeing big gains is like a reclamation of the fruits of our own labor? Like, my boss may be taking the surplus value of everything I create here at work, but he can't take these guns. I made them myself, and they're all mine. I don't know, someone smarter than me sound off in the comments. These communities, these identities under late-stage capitalism become ersatz individualist facsimiles of something that is real and missing in all of our lives. Is, I think what I'm getting at here? I don't know, I really lost the plot after Cabaret. So is yoga a scam? Of course not. Yoga is great. You should always talk to your doctor before starting any kind of new diet or exercise regimen. That's assuming you have a doctor. If you live in the United States, ask Reddit. But even with the very real risks I mentioned, yoga's probably better than a lot of other forms of exercise when it comes to safety and accessibility. And it really is great for toning, posture, stretching, etc. There's a reason it's been as popular as it is for as long as it has been. Yoga is not a scam. The real scam are the people who try to sell you on the idea that they're letting you in on ancient wisdom, or that you're gonna lose 6 pounds after one class, or that you need to push through pain or dehydration, or that the path to enlightenment is spending $250 a month to attend classes taught by someone making minimum wage in a room that smells like feet. But just as like a little temperature check, a little something to look out for. If anyone starts talking about seed oils, turn around and leave. Walk out the door. Run, even. Also a valid form of exercise, running away. It's here that, for the sake of the essay, I really want to be able to advocate for yoga practice in the West to be reimagined as a radical collectivist act. Tie everything up neatly, offer solutions to the concerning rightward drift of mainstream liberal society. But I don't really feel equipped to do that, and I don't want to lie to you. If you found a way to practice yoga communistly, if you're a teacher offering free community classes or whatever, more power to you. If you feel like the spiritual aspects of yoga or even more hard New Age practices like Wicca or whatever leave you more equipped to help your community through dark days, then that's awesome. I just like getting in my little workouts, being a bit more fit, in a bit less pain, and flooded with a bit more endorphins makes it easier for me to wake up every day and face an uncertain world. I'd like there to be a great big crescendo here, a climax to the essay, but I don't think I have it in me for this one. So instead, maybe this video should end quietly, like a yoga class. We'll all lay down, close our eyes, and try not to think.